Hello and welcome to the second of our Gardener's World specials, which is all about celebrating the gardening year. I feel at the moment the garden's just on the turn. We're leaving late summer, arriving in early autumn. The light levels have changed, the grasses are singing, there's lots to harvest. A few things are just starting to go over. Look at this agastache. It's lost that sort of real summer vibrant colour, but still holding incredible structure. And smells pretty good too. And isn't that the joy with gardening? Wherever you are in the calendar year, you know there's still loads to look forward to. On today's programme, we share some very special gardens and places which capture the best of those gardening seasons. Francis checks out the biggest single-span greenhouse in the world.
The scents, that whole air is filled with aromas and, of course, the sound of birds singing. So you really do feel that you could be exploring a Mediterranean mountain.
We visit an artist in County Wicklow who curates his garden like a living canvas.
To make a garden feel bigger, you can use colour creatively. All your cooler colours you would use as far away as possible, and they will give the illusion of depth.
And Carol delights in the sensations of summer at the gardens of Kelmarsh Hall in Northamptonshire.
Look at that. You don't know how to describe it, whether it's bright orange or brilliant red. Whatever, it lifts your spirits.
I'm just enjoying the gravel garden. Still feels really good. But what's it going to look like in winter? I think there's still going to be a decent amount of interest. The grasses all hold strong structure. Down there I've got this Euonymus, Elatus, Blade Runner. The stems are incredible. And I've got a wiggy wig bush, so the Muhlenbeckia that I planted earlier on in the year. I am so looking forward to seeing that just covered in a little dew. So there is so much to look forward to over the winter months. And in February, Nick went to Hillier's Winter Garden in Hampshire to find out exactly how much.
Imagine a 3-acre garden, which sits all but dormant during the summer months. Yet in winter, it suddenly bursts forth with life, colour, radiance, and a host of beautiful plants.
Hillier's Winter Garden was planted up 25 years ago, just as Fran Clifton arrived as head gardener.
Fran, the garden just looks spectacular at the moment. So many huge swathes of colour, beautiful plants, beautiful combinations. But I guess all of this is kind of miniaturisable. It could work in smaller gardens.
Anything you might see on a big scale here with 10, 20 corners, you could just have one at home. I think the key is the kind of the high athlete component in a plant, which has to really perform between the end of November and the end of February, where the plants have to sing.
And what do you sort of think of as the key components that make up a winter garden? What are those sets of plants that create the perfect balance?
Well, I would definitely pick up one of the cornices or a rubus if you have got the space for both. It's brilliant. So you have the reds, the oranges and the whites in there straight away. Conifers are fantastic for winter colour.
So that gives you the sort of evergreen solidity.
Absolutely. You have the stalwarts of good, solid background colour there, and then you just display all your other magical colours off it. Any grasses will always help with the kind of the ethereal look of a winter garden, the wind moving through, the frost setting on the grass leaves. Some sort of a scent ought to be there. So Daphnes, Hamamelis, any of those kind of really lovely scented plants. We don't even see the flowers sometimes, and you just walk by and you're surrounded by this cloud of perfume, which is lovely.
I mean, there's also some quite unusual things here, but again, that would work in smaller gardens, something like your Edgeworthia.
Lovely plant, absolutely beautiful. Comes from China, has lantern-like upside-down flowers almost, but it looks like white baubles hanging on an empty Christmas tree. It's a brilliant plant. I think it's just showing that for a quarter of the year, when we think there's nothing on out there, there's a heck of a lot going on in the winter garden.
The design is based on a circular walk, crisscrossed with paths and packed full of formal and more naturalistic combinations to provide inspiration.
And here is a great example of those component winter garden plants beautifully composed to establish this fabulous picture just here. Now it all starts in the background with the evergreen of the bamboo, and any number of plants can do that to set off a winter garden. But what's fabulous is coming forward. The hamamelis, or the witch hazel, in that real sulphur yellow, totally bounces out because of the bamboo behind it, but also because of the little black grass underneath it. That's Ophiopogon planiscapus nigrescens, creating this sea of black, which makes the sulphur yellow really pop. And that, of course, is enhanced even further by this grass sitting in front of it. This is Libertia peregrinans. It's got that really unusual tone, and that holds year round. But I think the real winner for me here in this composition is the Prunus cerula. It's got that wonderful kind of burnt orange tone to the bark, and it's glossy year round.
I'm a sucker for orange, and there's lots of it in this garden, alongside some truly dwarf trees.
Back in the 1980s, as a teenager, I was working at a nursery, and the absolute peak of fashion back then was growing dwarf conifers and heathers. Now, unfortunately, some nurseries were selling conifers that didn't turn out to be dwarf. In fact, they got vast, and it turned out to be a real problem for gardeners working in small plots. However, today there are plenty of cultivars and forms which I can guarantee will stay small, and this is a great example. This is Picea glauca Alberta Blue, and it's absolutely reached its peak of size. So these are now 25 years old, and they're not going to get a lot bigger. As you can see, they've got that beautiful pale blue tone which holds through summer and winter, but just over here there's something else going on as well. The conifers take on a totally new life with a different combination of plants. There's the large foliage of the hellebore with its lime green flowers providing a fabulous contrast. Then the white stems of the birch just emerging up into the sky and looking fantastic against the blue of the conifer. And then finally, the lime greens of this cornice and taking the eye off into the distance.
Peppered through this riot of colour, there are some very special flowering shrubs.
There are an amazing number of deliciously scented winter flowering plants, and this is a prime example. It's Chimonanthus praecox, often known as winter sweet. Oh, you can tell why, it's delicious, sweet, kind of soapy note to it. There are two different ways that you can grow this plant to make the most of its particular qualities. If you're a bit short of space, you can fan train it on a wall so it's completely flat. And that way the residual heat that's in the brick and coming out of the house will help the scent of the flower emanate out into the garden. The other way to grow it is as they have done here, which is a freeform shrub, but planted so the afternoon and early evening light comes through it, and that way these beautiful translucent petals get fantastically illuminated and glow all the way through till dusk. I've been lucky enough to visit numerous winter gardens over the years, but I have to say, without doubt, this is the best. And that's for two reasons, I reckon. Partly because it has the most fabulous range of the best performing winter plants, but secondly, because they are composed and put together in the most beautiful compositions of colour and texture. There's things going on through every view, vista and angle. And I've just noticed behind me here, virtually at the back of this border, is a beautiful combination of the winter aconite, Eranthis, fabulously naturalising and making its way through the Libertia. I think it's a fantastic combination which really embodies the beauty of this garden.
That is some praise from Nick. It must be an incredible garden. But I don't think it's just what we put in our gardens as to how much we get out of them over the winter months. I think some of it's about backing off, not being so tidy. I might cut back something in the garden if it gets slightly frosted and goes slimy. But apart from that, I leave everything else to the following spring. It leaves me with wonderful seed heads, and they'll provide really good structural interest. But more than anything, I know that I'm leaving habitat for wildlife, and then all of a sudden, we're seeing the garden in a slightly different way. Earlier on in the year, we went to Ireland to meet a gardener whose relationship with his garden and also the creatures that visit runs very deep.
Gardening to me is about engaging with plants. It's watching the relationship between the flowers, the plant, and the animals, the pollinators, the insects, the birds. I don't see this as my garden. I'm just another animal living in this space.
A beautiful thing to be part of and to witness. Isn't that beautiful? Look.
My name is TJ Maher. I'm a painter and I'm an artist, and I live here in County Wicklow in Ireland. I've been living here for 25 years with my husband Simon. I found the name Patana in a Buddhist book in meditation, and it just meant to be present in the moment. And for me, that was my draw to that word, because I can live in my mind. We as humans, we live a lot in our minds, projecting into the future and thinking about things in the past. But animals and plants, they've always, for me, they've brought me into that moment of nowness. Colour is a huge preoccupation for me as a painter. So I'm very conscious of how I use colour in the garden and how I place colour. So here, there's a little area just beside me here. It's in the shade, and it's quite dark compared to where I'm sitting here at the moment. So I have different colour palette in there in the shade. So there's a lot of different shades of green, little bits of white, soft pinks, reds, and stronger hot colours. Actually, they don't look right in the shade. They need the sunshine to sing and to show the intensity of the colour that they are. And to make a garden feel bigger, you can use colour creatively. So like you could use your softer blues, all your cooler colours you would use as far away as possible in a smaller garden. And they will give the illusion of depth, and they'll make the garden appear like it retreats, and the blues seem further than actually they are. They can appear. Cool colours will do that. The secret really is to put your hot colours close to you and keep the cool colours further away. This is all new planting. So my plan is in the autumn then to edit this. This is a colour palette between two primary colours, between red and blue. So I've brought out these plants, and I'm going to audition these plants from the inner garden, and I'm going to place them and just see what they look like in the borders. Actually, that's beautiful there. Look at that. With the agastache behind. That's nice there with that. In the autumn, I'll dig up the plant from the inner garden, divide it. So next year, I know when this flowers, it'll look exactly like that. I think this is going to be nice in here somewhere. And it has the same colour as a Linaria Dial Park. Do you see it? Just a bigger pop of it. And it lightens the whole composition. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's painting. I'm painting with plants. This is a torque. It's a Celtic necklace or a bangle, kind of an amphitheatre shape. I used the torque as inspiration for a new part of the garden, which we only started planting last year. At its heart is a mound in the shape of a torque. But I wanted this new garden to reference the wider environment too. I've designed it around the view of the church because it's a beautiful building. So, I mean, it's our borrowed landscape. Very often there's beautiful things. It could be a neighbour's tree, something in the distance that we can bring in, because the eye, when it actually travels through the plants, the eye doesn't know what the boundary of your garden is. The eye will just travel as far as it can travel, to the hills in the background, or for me it is the mountains in the background, and the church. So for me, designing this, it was a journey of plants and the insects and colour to get to the torque. And at a certain point, you'll see that the church is actually revealed through a gate. I tilted it towards the church. So at one point in particular, while you're walking to the torque, you have a clear view of all of the church, just for a few moments. Here I am in the torque, completely enveloped in the plants, absolutely buzzing with insects. And it's so lovely, it's so holding and nurturing, and it feels so safe to be here. I can't imagine not having plants and animals in my life. I couldn't imagine who I would be actually without them. And I love them. That probably sounds strange, but I do, I love them. I think nature knows when it's held and when it's honoured. And people come here, visitors come in here to this garden, and I'm always amazed. They always comment on how the garden feels. And for me, that's the greatest compliment, because it's what you can't see. It's the magic. And to be part of that, it's just, for me, that's just living my life.
I thought that was fascinating, listening to TJ and that sort of conversation between the artist and the garden. And also he talked about editing, and that's exactly what I'm doing here now in the gravel garden. I only planted this, what, 8-9 months ago, and it's really galloped on. So I'm looking how I might adjust it just to get a little bit more out of it next year. And the first thing I'm doing is just teasing out some of the things that have self-seeded. Now we've got the first of your home films. And we're going to meet two fellas that I think have definitely created a garden that talks of their personality.
Hi Gardeners World, welcome to my garden on the borders of Kent. My name is Martin, this is Summer, and this is Willow. We moved into our home in 2013. Over 8 years, our garden kept changing and eventually developed into a tropical oasis. We've planted a small bucket with water to attract wildlife, and now we're going to build a bigger pond. So here's my husband Robert helping me dig up the ferns. I say hi Robert.
Hi.
And this is the final result. Dragonflies and bees always visit. Being north facing, we don't get much sun all day, but blueberries are an easy, nutritious fruit everybody should grow. And even Willow loves them too. So my motto is, give anything a go and try something new. Enjoy any outside space that you may have.
It still never ceases to amaze me, adding even the smallest drop of water to your garden, what it brings. The wildlife just seems to rock up. But talking about water, not everything likes it. It's the time of year when these aeoniums and the rest of the succulents have got to go inside. They definitely won't love being soaked through the winter months. Mix that up with the cold, you've got a load of not very happy plants. Some will go in the porch, others will go in a cold greenhouse. But what's wonderful, if you haven't got the time, the space, the energy, the inclination to grow things like this, there's lots of places right across the country that are growing them and looking after them, and we can go and see them. And earlier on this year, Francis went to Wales to do just that.
Nestled within the 560-acre site of the National Botanic Garden of Wales is the Great Glasshouse. This is the biggest single-span glasshouse in the world. Step inside and you'll find a spectacular paradise of Mediterranean plants. The largest cultivated collection in the Northern Hemisphere. And the feeling that you get when you're in here is so transporting. The scents, that whole air is filled with aromas and, of course, the sound of birds singing. So you really do feel that you could be exploring a Mediterranean mountain. Over 2,000 plants from 6 different regions of the world are grown here, carefully tended to by horticulturists like James Kettle, who has spent a decade of his life working here. When people think about Mediterranean flora, they tend to think about the classic plants from the Med itself, don't they? But there's actually a bit more to it than that, isn't there?
Yes, exactly. So that includes lavenders, rosemaries, cistus, which a lot of people do grow in their own gardens. Not a lot of people know that the actual Mediterranean flora spans globally. We've got the Canary Islands, we've got the Mediterranean basin, we've got South Africa, central Chile, southern and southwestern Australia, and a little sliver of California. Little pockets of flora on the western continents of those areas have the same climatic conditions that the Mediterranean basin would have. And that has developed a really unique, diverse range of flora. Interestingly, it only covers about 2 to 3% of the global population of plants.
Really? So quite a rare habitat, actually.
Yeah, very rare habitat. But they actually harbour around 20% of all sort of known plant species. So diversity-wise, they are unique. So that's what we try and represent here. Chilean flora is quite interesting because it sits within quite a small landmass. So you've got the ocean on one side and you've got the Andes Mountains on the other. Behind me, this is a typical Chilean plant. This is Puya bertrioniana. It's actually a bromeliad.
That's an incredible flower spike.
Yeah, it grows fairly close to the Andes Mountains. So like a lot of Mediterranean plants from Chile, they still like that free drained soil, but they do get a lot of moisture, which maybe is a slight difference to the Mediterranean basin where it's a little bit more drier.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And is that because the clouds are caught by the Andes as they come in off the ocean?
Yeah, so a lot more moisture gets dropped on the Chilean areas. But within that region, you know, we have other typical plants that you would grow in your garden at home. So we do have the Peruvian lily,
yes,
which is the Alstroemeria. We have Libertius chilensis, which you can also grow in your gardens at home. Again,
that's a beautiful, lovely flower spike, isn't it?
Just a lovely sort of white flower. Again, they just need that free drained soil to grow well. And they will adapt well in the UK climate here. So this is the blue hibiscus. So it's Allergine hooglei, a nice example of Western Australian flora. It prefers to grow in mainly sandy soil,
right,
and has quite a bit of a rough habit, but it flowers in here, it flowers all year.
Really?
All year, really, really stunning. Ideally, we can grow this in a conservatory if you want to try and push it. It wouldn't survive very well outside.
Okay.
Freezing temperatures, it would knock it on the head.
No frost at all?
No frost at all. It's quite a sensitive plant, really. But you've got to get that soil right. So a lot of Australian plants, they like that quite mineral-rich soil. So again, it'd be free draining, like a loam with maybe sand in it, you know.
Okay.
But they are quite a bit of a challenge, but they are, you know, again, they are available in the UK for, you know, just to go, really, just have a go.
I love the way that the light comes through the petals.
Yes, it
So
almost
gorgeous.
looks a bit more sort of ultraviolet, doesn't it, when it's
Yeah.
when the sun hits it.
Really stunning. The Cape region of South Africa is famous for its plant diversity. And within that, there are some amazingly diverse Mediterranean species that really represent that. Just the textures here are so incredible. Take this Phylica with its hairy, tiny foliage. Very, very small, and you just can't stop touching it. So tactile. That with Athanasia, this amazing tall silver foliage, very reduced leaf form. And of course, the famous Protea with massive rubbery leaves. Now, all these very different looking plants have adapted to the same classically Mediterranean conditions. That's really high wind, really high light levels, and very high temperatures. And yet, they've come up with completely different and really beautiful solutions to those problems. The highly aromatic and often medicinal oils in many of these plants allow forest fires to burn out quickly, enabling regeneration of the habitat. Californian poppy is a plant that many of us gardeners will be very familiar with. We grow it every year as an annual, some of us. But something less familiar, and I think far more interesting, is this succulent. It's called Dudleya. And succulence is something that's developed by lots of plants to cope with drought. But this one, which has evolved in a really high altitude in California, has developed something else. It's got this lovely white powder all over its leaves, and that reflects all that famous Californian light, which is so good for making films, not so easy to grow in if you're a plant. With so many wonderful examples of flora from all over the world here, it goes to show we can be quite ambitious if we want to dazzle our own gardens in the UK with a touch of the Mediterranean.
And if you do fancy having a go at something a little exotic, why not try a succulent or two? You can get to know them first indoors over the winter. Still to come, Harry explores a spectacular garden created on the steepest slopes in the Pennines.
By making sure that the cultivated garden blends into the landscape beyond, gives a much more expansive feeling to the garden, that the garden is limitless, that there is no distinction between here and over there.
And Carol immerses herself in the wonderful colours and scents of summer as she visits Kelmarsh Hall in Northamptonshire.
In a garden of this size and scale, you can actually allow a single plant to have its head, to have the stage to itself, to just let rip.
First, Rachel finds joy in a plant which dazzles in the depths of winter.
Hamamelis is an unequivocal star of the winter garden. Famous for its spidery flowers that wrinkle out like tiny fireworks from each bare branch, they bring daring colour and scent on the darkest of short, cold days. Also known as witch hazel and pollinated by night-flying moths, they're great as a cut flower, as the delicate blooms are remarkably robust. Bigger varieties can reach about 6 metres, like this Hamamelis Arnold Promise with its sulphur yellow flowers. Smaller ones are nearer 3 metres, but all with a gentle spreading habit and easily pruned in spring after flowering. As the flowering branches cast only a delicate shade and give protection, they're great for underplanting with spring bulbs or more permanent ground cover to show off their flaming colours. This is Hamamelis intermedia weirdo, with its tufts of the palest yellow flowers. And all sitting pretty in a sea of Corsican hellebores. Hamamelis like good drainage and a sunny site, perhaps with some nearby shrubs for shelter. This is Hamamelis intermedia Rubin, looking glorious surrounded by grasses and hydrangea seed heads. These really are plants that sing for their supper, flowering for weeks and providing a focal point of feathery colour against the evergreens and ground cover of winter. They are a cold weather delight.
I feel a little embarrassed to admit that I haven't actually got one in the garden, but I promise you this year I will be adding a wonderful witch hazel somewhere. I'm in the bottom end of the walled garden and it's an area that's definitely started to frustrate me. In the winter it can be this deep in water, but then in the summer it really bakes. I've chopped and changed and experimented with different things. And you know what? Just as that frustration starts to build, Mother Nature starts to guide. And that's what's happened. The stars here now have become the self-seeders. I've got the verbenas, the eryngiums. There's some borage and verbascums. And I like this sort of free, light, airy feel, and I'm going to carry that all the way through to that quince. I think it makes you realise that gardening is in reality just one big experiment. And if nothing else, just keep persevering. And on that note, Arit went to the Pennines to visit a couple that have created a garden in very, very challenging conditions.
I'm 1,000 feet up in the rolling hills of the Pennines, and I'm at Scape Lodge, a garden that's 1/3 of an acre that's been built on the site of an old quarry. So it's really steep, it's south-facing and very exposed. So how do you create a garden with lots of seasonal interest on a site like this without it being an uphill challenge? The garden is made up of densely planted borders, linked by a series of winding gravel paths and steps. The meandering walkways take you on a journey where you discover many floral surprises. But despite this steeply sloping site being cold and windy in the winter, the garden feels incredibly intimate. The site has been developed by David and Elizabeth Smith. The higher, free draining parts of the garden are home to sun lovers like coral-coloured dahlias and erysimum. And in the lower part of the garden, dappled shade lovers like ferns, hostas and astrantias thrive. More tender plants are placed in pots which can be moved around the garden to create colourful plant combinations. Without doubt, you've given yourselves a challenge with this site. Where did you start?
I think we started on the main path because I was really keen to change the view from the kitchen window. The planting, it just looked the same.
Okay.
And I thought, I want something more interesting. I want some flowers there.
We also wanted a vegetable garden. There were a couple of raised beds there, so we developed that.
How do you go about making sure you've got the right plant in the right place?
I think we start with observation, watching how the light comes round and looking at what the soil is like. It varies quite a lot in the garden, from really poor sandy soil to quite heavy clay.
So we can grow plants in the shade here, as well as it being a very sunny southeast facing slope. It's getting that balance and shift. We try things. Some things just work, some things don't.
Yeah. We tend not to persevere if things, you know, are not doing well, because there's quite a lot of work. You need things that get on with it, really. I think.
And I think we've had to adapt the planting over time. As the trees and shrubs have matured, more of the garden has become shady. And we have relied, say, more on pots. We now have dahlias in pots. We used to have them in the borders.
The terracing clearly helps with the site, but how did you decide which plants to choose?
I think the natural vegetation on hillsides, so the vegetation around here where you get a mixture of grasses and little shrubs and a few trees and then perennials. We were trying to create something that was like that, but brighter and more reliable, that had an extended season.
The garden is visible for miles around, so we wanted something that sat comfortably in the local landscape, that melded with it, but was clearly garden.
As well as gardening in harmony with the landscape, Elizabeth and David have created spaces to enjoy the magnificent vistas that the site has to offer. This garden has been designed to take full advantage of the glorious views. By blurring the boundary, by making sure that the cultivated garden blends into the landscape beyond, it means that it gives a much more expansive feeling to the garden, that the garden is limitless, that there is no distinction between here and over there. On a sunny day, you can see for miles, but inviting in the views on a sloping site means you also have to contend with the worst of the British weather. And rain, in particular, brings its own set of challenges. Now, one of the things that's going to be a key issue is erosion. The water's coming down from the top of the hill, it just wants to run all the way through this garden. So as much as there are stones in place to help to keep the bank sturdy, the plants also play a role as well. Alchemilla mollis, the ferns, there are geraniums. These all have fibrous root systems, which means that they can absorb a lot of water, as well as making sure the structure of the soil is held together. And that is going to slow the flow and also help with the erosion. I absolutely love how immersive this garden is. I'm surrounded by plants. On a practical level, it's great because it creates shade and different microclimates and even can help to stop the wind going through the site. But on a more emotional level, it really plays with your senses. So it's not just what I'm visually seeing, but I'm so up close, I can touch the plants, I can smell them, and that really gives you a sense of wonder. And it's that sense of wonder that entices you to continue to explore the garden. It goes to show, even on the most challenging of sites, with the right approach, and the right methods and the right plants, you can create an amazing garden almost anywhere.
The creation of that garden was some feat. And I loved the idea that even on an exposed hillside, there was these places you could tuck yourself away and feel comfortable and safe. But Harriet also talked about immersion. And that's exactly what I've done here. I've tightened up the pathway, planted grasses that are really in your face. And you have to come on a journey. You have to engage with the area and you start to see the detail of the plants and it becomes an experience. I know in reality that's not everybody's cup of tea. Some of us like more control, neat, tidy. But what I do know is the moment we start gardening, it seems to get under our skin. And now, we've got another one of your films and we're going to meet a young man who I would say in the last 18 months has definitely been bitten by the bug.
Hello, I'm Ross and this is the garden of our shared house in Bristol where I live with my friends Owen, Chloe, Bryony and Louise. I started gardening in April last year at the beginning of the first lockdown. It's been a real comfort to have this outdoor space to watch things grow. Obviously, I was really lucky here because this garden has once been carefully designed with lots of different beds and interesting areas to the garden. But one of the first things I had to do was just figure out what was here, what I wanted to keep and what needed clearing away. One of the first jobs at the start of last summer was to clear out loads of bindweed from all of these beds. I made a little compost heap at the back of the garden. That's been going well with stuff from the kitchen and other cuttings from the garden. And then this year, the approach was just to see how much I could grow. There wasn't too much strategy. I didn't have a colour scheme or anything like that. Basically wanted to try my hand at growing a few seeds and go for an explosion of colour. Verbena, Campanula and the tobacco plants have done well, but out of about 3 trays of seedlings, I've only got 1 delphinium left, so I'm looking forward to that flowering. I expect my housemates probably think I've become a bit obsessed with gardening, but I've found it really fulfilling. Time spent doing it's definitely been worth it.
Ross, I'd absolutely agree about time being well spent. Good on you. What I'm doing at the moment is just starting to mulch all the way through the woodland here. And what I'm using here is well-rotted leaf mould. Interesting, when I was designing this area, first of all, it was about how I wanted it to feel, the atmosphere that I was trying to capture. So I went to shape, form, texture, and an awful lot of green, and it creates a wonderful calmness. But we all know that colour brings something completely different to the party. And earlier in the year, Carol went to Kelmarsh Hall in Northamptonshire to see the garden at its colourful summer best.
I love gardens. I love them in every season. Spring, summer, autumn or winter. Every one has its own special charm, its own superb quality. But right now, it's the height of summer. For lots of gardeners, high summer represents the peak of their garden's performance. Fulsome, floriferous and full of colour. At this time of year, traditional herbaceous borders are full to the brim with brilliant colour, provided by simple, straightforward plants like this Achillea, with its great plateau of bright yellow flowers. Oh, this Kniphofia, the red-hot poker, this one's Kniphofia ruperi. It's positively a flame. And then there are plants like Litnus chalcedonica. Look at that. You don't know how to describe it, whether it's bright orange or brilliant red. Whatever it is, it sets the border alight and it lifts your spirits. This garden is so relaxed and informal. And yet, when you look more closely, there are all sorts of devices used through these borders that work brilliantly well and that actually take your eye down the border, so you're sort of led along the path. In this one, either side of the path are planted 2 plants. There's a geranium brookside and this lovely Alchemilla mollis. Classic combination of this sort of greeny yellow and blue are used over and over again. And every so often, here and there, they're punctuated by the very best of summer flowers. Nepeta, Astrantia, Sweet Williams. It's magical. One of the plants that absolutely typifies the height of summer are the penstemons. a whole range of colours, masses of flowers, and although the flowers do go on for months and months, this has to be their very zenith. They're such easy plants to grow too. All they require is sunshine and a reasonably well-drained soil. They love some organic matter under there too to produce flowers of this size and quality. Now, unlike nearly everything in the borders at this time of year, which are almost completely composed of herbaceous perennials, the penstemons are evergreen perennials, so they keep all this foliage. Another wonderful quality that penstemons have is that they're absolutely impervious to slug attacks. Slugs just don't like them at all. When you think about a midsummer herbaceous border, you generally think about these big splashes of brilliant colour. But here, these borders prove that you can do it a different way. They're full of soft pastel colours, pinks, lavenders, pale, pale blues. But the thing that really makes these borders work is the inclusion of this lovely thalictrum with these soft, limey green flowers. And if you look over here, there's a great sort of flowing stream of these fluffy flowers that comes right the way down through here. And it makes these blues, the blue of this Campanula lactiflora, the milky bellflower. That says a lot, doesn't it, about the kind of blue it is. And then these spikes of Veronicastrum, they just absolutely made by the inclusion of this pale colour. But take the thalictrum away and it'd be a much, much duller picture. It's that makes these borders sparkle, but sparkle softly. Prominent around the garden are the tall spires of Hibiscus chakesii. Each flower has a tiny purple centre with orange anthers. Verbascums or mulleins have become fashionable over the last few decades. In a garden of this size and scale, you can actually allow a single plant to have its head, to have the stage to itself. That's exactly what happens here with this lovely Cephalaria gigantea. It's a giant creamy scabious, and these stems thrust up so they're almost as tall as the walls that surround this garden. In the first place, there were just a few plants here, but it self-seeds really easily, and before you know where you are, you've got this great mass of pale lemon with these tall, strong stems. It's not even staked. First of all, you get these gorgeous lemon flowers, beautiful soft colour, and when all these petals have fallen to the ground, they're replaced by seed heads. And the birds absolutely feast on these seed heads. It's so brilliant to actually have this space to be able to allow a plant to just let rip. Soon autumn will be here with its glorious golden hues, and then the cold starkness of winter, the anticipation of spring. But for me, for now, I just want to revel in the glory of summer.
Glorious. Interesting little note from that though, when you're putting plants and playing with them, just that little pop of a lighter colour every now and then repeated can really bring a border alive. And I know next summer seems a bit of a long time off at the moment, but don't worry, before that we have spring. And that's what I'm thinking about at the moment. How can I add an extra bit of spring colour? And further along here, I inherited a wonderful sort of swathe of Tulip sylvestris. It's got a lovely, rich yellow flower, wonderful scent. So what I'm thinking, if I add another tulip species here, that will start to give me this wonderful sort of repeat, but using a different colour. So I'm going for Tulip turkistanica, which will grow to about 20 centimetres, 30 centimetres at best. Got a beautiful white flower. So all I've done here is I've made holes that are about 15 centimetres deep. Just going to drop those in and then simply backfill. And what I'm going to do is plant them over the next couple of months. Now, in April, we went to visit a garden where the tulip plays a rather big part in the gardening year.
Tulips completely obsess me. I mean, I spend most of the year thinking about them. They come to flower and I'm in this sort of tulip madness for about 2 months where I can absolutely do nothing else except immerse myself in them. And then they finish and I go completely flat for a while. I have to sort of go to ground because I can't believe that they've gone out of my life yet again. And then the whole cycle starts all over again. My name's Polly Nicholson and we live in a small village at the foot of the Marlborough Downs in West Wiltshire. Tulips are harbingers of joy. I love the choice, the versatility, and the sheer exuberance of flower that they bring to the garden in so many different contexts. They're all over the place in quite ridiculous quantities. This is probably our most traditional type of herbaceous planting in the whole garden. This actually adheres to a more formal rose garden design. We call these perennial tulips. They're not, there isn't a perennial tulip, but we treat them as perennials and we encourage them to come back year on year. We supplement them by about 20 to 30% each year to make sure we have a really good show. And we choose the tulips which we plant perennially like this really, really carefully. So we've got 2 Varidaflora tulips, which means they've got green in them essentially. Vera chic here, you can see the stripe of green up the back. Not my favourite colour, this vibrant pink, but somehow in this setting and at this time of year it works really well. And then we've got Black Hero, which is a nice foil to it, which is a double Queen of Night and has a really lovely, glossy, deep feel to it. And surprisingly, given it's such a dark tulip, it works really well in all weathers. So Wiltshire can throw its worst at it and it actually survives. This one's a new one for us this year, which is Request. It's come through slightly pink for a proper request, which can happen with tulips. You don't get exactly what you're asking for. And we've just dotted these around rather than doing a really heavy dose of orange, just enough to bring the other colours again into a bit more of a harmony with each other. And these are our Dolly Mixtures. They came about completely by happy accident. They started their lives up in the flower field, and then rather than throw them away, which wouldn't fit with our sustainable ethos, we put them in these banks back of house. It's completely higgledy-piggledy, and they come back the next year as a wonderful surprise. And people prefer it to some of our really carefully curated plantings. It has a different type of appeal, and I can see that. I love it. It gives me joy every day. We've got quite a few pots in this garden. Big pots, small pots, they're all over the place. We've got the dolly tubs, terracottas, I've got old cow troughs, I've got stone troughs. You know, we're a bit careful about what we choose. If we're using a type of species tulip, we'd put it in a sort of shallow stone trough for an alpine setting, but then something like this will thrive in a dolly tub. Have them on a balcony, have them out on a windowsill, make sure they're, you know, safe. Have them at your front door, have them in a yard. It's just a way you can bring colour and flowers into your life quite easily. It's just a really great way of expressing yourself and having fun. So this is a private family garden, and I've developed a small organic flower business. For that reason, I now grow a lot of tulips up in the flower field. It means I'm not permanently raiding our own garden for flowers, so that's a positive. Probably got sort of going on 5,000 annuals this year, probably about 3 dozen different varieties, which is nothing when you consider that I think there are over 3,000 different tulips on the market today. You know, this is just a drop in the ocean. The great thing about tulips is when they go into water, they actually carry on growing. So you lose this sort of slightly stiff effect and they start doing their own thing, which means if you're, you know, a very formal flower arranger, it can create problems. But I like going with my material and going with nature. So I love the fact that they move the whole time. If you pick a sweet pea, it doesn't open any more or grow any more than at the point you pick it, whereas tulips develop more of a personality once you've cut them. I know I said tulips are accessible, but my most favourite tulips are historic tulips. I absolutely love English florists' tulips, which are the rarest of the rare. This is one called Lord Stanley, and I got the bulb from the Wakefield and North of England Tulip Society last year. And you can see extraordinary jewel-like tones. And it's this deep, deep carmine red, feathered with bright yellow all around the edges of the petals. And if I was to show them this year, like I've done previously, I'd do it in these beer bottles, which is the traditional way. These are both good examples of broken tulips, whereby a plain-coloured breeder tulip will at some point have broken into one or more other colours. And this, you can see, is broken into flames around the edge. So the base colour, which is a deep yellow, has feathered its way around here. It was broken tulips like these which inspired tulip mania in the 17th century, when the Dutch became completely obsessed with them and bulbs changed hands. In fact, bulbs which hadn't even dug up from the ground changed hands for ridiculous sums of money. I think it's completely exquisite. This detail around the edge, I mean, it looks like it's been executed with a paintbrush. The tulips have completely taken over my life. I've become really obsessed by them, but I'm not the first person to. It's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. To me, they're a source of endless joy and discovery. And I hope this will persuade other people to enjoy them in the same way.
Absolutely beautiful. Also, I found out exactly what to do with my leftover beer bottles. Now, since that film was made, we found out that Polly has been awarded the National Collection for Heritage Tulips, which is fantastic news. And I imagine she's incredibly proud. Probably nearly as proud as I am of those quinces. I'm afraid that is about it from us. I do hope you've enjoyed spending a little bit of time here in the garden, because I've loved sharing it with you. Monty will be back next week at Longmeadow with the last of our Gardeners World specials. In the meantime, you look after yourselves. Bye-bye.